today I'm going to be talking about flipped learning. Before we begin, I just wanted to give you a brief introduction and tell you how I first came to know about flipped learning. I used to be in a college in Guatemala and I studied education and entrepreneurship. And one of the things that the program prided itself in was that it had the latest and greatest trends in education, and that's what they were training us with. On one occasion, one of my professors said that we were going to be using a flipped learning approach to our course. And what she would do was give us the material that she wanted us to know by the next lecture ahead of time. She would assign a video or a reading or just something ahead of time in order to have her teaching time be more of a Socratic dialogue, a discussion of some sort, hands-on, collaborative, just things that we now know are progressive were what she was hoping to implement, but always based on the fact that we had looked at the information ahead of time. Now, would you be surprised if I told you that it wasn't very successful? There were only 3 students in our classroom, and that included myself. Many times, I can't tell you just how many, I was the only one that had watched the video, which made the discussion of the dialogue something that just wasn't possible, or it frustrated the teacher greatly. So I want us to look at flipped learning today and find out what it is. Now, I've defined it as an approach to learning where the lectures are watched by video the day before the class. From my research, I found out that teachers will assign, not like my teacher who gave material to be read, but rather an actual online video so that the students can look at it ahead of time and come to class the next day prepared. So class time would be used for collaborative activities, discussions, and hands-on learning, just like my college professor hoped to do, but this would be implemented in elementary and high school. I think that the best way to define this would be as students do homework at school and school at home. It's no longer the other way around, and it's such a foreign concept to think that the students come to the school to work rather than to acquire the knowledge, which is what we had done for many, many years. Now, I wondered if this was a new trend. Was it truly as modern as educators make it sound? And I found that it isn't. We've actually had flipped learning since the 1920s. Now, obviously, the difference was that the technology was something else. Now we have a lot of devices that can do videos online, and we have internet access pretty much everywhere in the United States, which means that it became an attractive model, and since educators are always looking for ways to innovate the classroom, this just seemed like the next best thing. So what are some of the advantages of flipped learning? Now, I know that we've heard quite a couple of things already that have raised some red flags, but we can find something positive regarding flipped learning. The first one would be personalized, self-paced learning. What do I mean by this? Well, if I'm assigning a video to a student that usually struggles because they're too slow taking notes, or maybe they just need to hear things again, all they have to do is pause the video to continue writing notes, or go over the same video again and again and again so that they can understand the concept better, which sounds great because then you wouldn't be looking into trying to get a help class maybe implemented, but rather you know that they can just rewatch that video as many times as necessary. We also have flexibility. Flexibility in the fact that if a student has a device and the technology, or excuse me, the internet necessary for it, they can sit in a classroom for EST and watch the lecture for the next day and prepare. They can watch it while the parents are waiting in a doctor's appointment. They can do it pretty much anywhere as long as they have the resources necessary for it. And it also frees up the time of the teacher because since they come to the class and they've already learned what they were supposed to get that day, all she has to do is focus on answering questions, creating dialogue, and deepening the understanding of what has already been acquired. That's another advantage. Students are supposed to come to class already prepared. They don't come as, if we want to call it, a blank slate. We're not taking them from the known to the unknown, but rather they are already in the area of the unknown and it's become known to them. And what I'm trying to do is grab this information that they already have and deepen it or just kind of reinforce it. But it's no longer my job to do that in the physical classroom, but rather either record myself in a video doing it or assign a video of some famous or well-known online platform that will do that for me. Another thing is when the students are absent or the teacher is absent, be it because of chickenpox or something like COVID-19, well, that doesn't really matter because they can watch the videos from the comfort of their home. So learning would technically not have to stop because a student or a teacher is sick. Also, there is increased personal responsibility. Now, I know that my students wouldn't want to sit and watch their lectures every afternoon that I assign them. But if I can somehow motivate them, they would become much more responsible, correct? Because now they're taking care of their own education. They are the ones that are deciding that they want to learn, which is why they're watching their videos. Like I said, there are several things that are positive about it, and I'm sure in your mind you're thinking, oh, but this and that. But let's just look at a couple more of these positive trends before I delve into the disadvantages. Now, another thing is that there's more time for the teacher to engage with the student. What does this mean? Well, like I told you before, usually you would stand in front of the classroom, you would teach, and if you were in second grade, you would take some time in between things to check seat work and go back and forth and answer some questions, but not all of them. And this would only be for a brief amount of time. Now, if I don't have to teach anymore, but I can just do kind of that homework check and just go back and forth in the classroom, well, that would give me a lot of time to work with my strugglers. I can make sure that Johnny, who has been doing a terrible job at the reading, gets 10 minutes of my time to get better. And all my other students that are so much better at it, I can just have them silent read or just do whatever they need to because I no longer have to teach. So it seems like there would be more time for me to focus on my strugglers instead of teaching to the average, which is what has been the norm in a traditional classroom. Let's talk about some of the disadvantages. Like we heard, the positives, I think some of them could be turned into negatives, but let's just delve into it. The first thing that I want to talk about is that flipped learning is actually not very popular among students. In the research that I read and some of the experiments that were made in classrooms around the world, several of the students said, I could come to the classroom to teach. I don't like it. I want to have my afternoons back. So many of them had negative things to say about flipped learning, yet progressives are still insisting that this is a great thing, that the students are gonna absolutely love it. But they're finding out, as they're asking them specifically, that they don't like it. They would rather have the professor teach, raise their hand, ask questions. They want the interaction, the in-person learning to be happening. Also, the reliance on having the students be the ones that watch the videos is a big if. Just like my college professor found out, if the students don't come in ready, well, what am I going to teach? How am I going to deepen the learning? There's just no way that that's going to happen. In fact, there was a study made of 79 students, and they were asked to watch 8 science videos. Out of the 79, one student watched all 8 of them. What a discouraging thing it would be if my students walked into the classroom and more times than not a single student has watched the video. I would have to put aside everything that I prepared and stand in front of the classroom and do what I've always done, which is to teach them. So if they won't watch what they're supposed to, then having this reliance on them becomes something that's pivotal in the success of this new technology, this new methodology that they're trying to implement. So I definitely don't want to rely on that as a traditional educator because there's no way I can guarantee that the students are learning. I can also foresee teacher burnout. Just by seeing how COVID hit and all the things that teachers had to do without them even going into the classroom with the students in there to do, just thinking of having all that interaction happen in the morning and then having to record every single class in the afternoon and prepare the material, and teachers would burn out. I know that it would be challenging for them, but there were also several that voiced an opinion in one of the articles that I read that was specifically targeted to teachers implementing flipped learning into the classroom, that said one of their biggest concerns was that they were not going to have enough time, even if they were given the entire summer to do it, to have this become something plausible in their classroom. Another disadvantage is that the results are based on feelings rather than facts. So when you ask the students, how do you feel about what you learned today? They would say, oh, I feel great. I watched my video, I understood, and some of them would lie, they wouldn't even watch the video. So they would say that they thought they knew the material, they felt confident about it, their self-esteem was built, but when the results were actually tested, it was found that they actually didn't know what they were talking about. So even though their confidence, or should we say pride, was built, that didn't mean that any information actually went up there and that they were able to understand any of what was going on in the classroom. Also, the biggest disadvantage, I think, of this entire methodology is that there is no conclusive evidence of success. Not a single article, not one, said that this methodology is successful as if implemented in the classroom. It could be successful with one subject, but if you try to grab this approach and put it inside of a classroom and do it for the entirety of every single subject, it just continued to fail. It continued to be something that didn't give them the guarantee that the students were going to watch it, that they were actually going to participate, that they could be tested on the information. It just was not a good thing. The next thing that I found was that students, or should I say parents, could not afford this kind of education. Not even the government would be able to afford this kind of education, because it would mean that they would have to provide every single American student with a technological device. But not only that, they would need the internet to access so they could be on the online platform. Can you imagine that? Every single student with a technological device that isn't necessarily them, it's from the school, so it has to go back. Oh, if you start crunching numbers and multiplying things, Title I schools wouldn't be able to do it because they can't, like they're there because they can't afford education. Small private schools, Christian private schools that are already scrambling to find the fundings to keep going would also be scratching their heads thinking, how are we going to make this happen? So if it's too expensive, it's something that truly should not be implemented in the classroom. And the next thing that raised a big red flag is unlimited access to internet. I would never want to be the reason that one of my students got into something that they shouldn't because I asked them to be on their computer all afternoon. With internet comes the fact of, is it censored or is it uncensored? How can I guarantee that every single one of my parents is going to censor the internet in a way that's going to guarantee that the student will be safe? There is no way. As a Christian educator, I know that that would not make me somebody that is giving the students the best way to succeed, spiritually speaking. Now, they might be able to watch the best lecture they've ever watched in their lives online, but what did they do before that? What did they do after that? Did they even watch it? Free access to the internet, big red flag. It's not something that I would want on my conscience. It's not something that I would want to promote if I already know that I could give them the information right here where I can see them and I can just assign homework in paper, or that their research is done by a certain page, or that I know that they're being watched, that I can take care of their heart and of their mind. As I continue to analyze flipped learning, I came to the conclusion that if students are unmotivated and they lack the resources, why implement it? If my student is not going to watch the class, if my student does not have the resources, if all I'm doing is giving the parent more of a financial burden to try to get their student to learn in an effective way, then truly it isn't effective. And if my students don't even want to watch the class because they think it's boring to have to go home and do it too, that's not something I want to promote. I can be entertaining. I can stand in front of the classroom and make sure that they're engaged, but I cannot guarantee that that will happen if they are watching it online. Now, teachers don't have the time to provide all the material that's necessary. Research was done, and even if the teacher were given the entire summer to record the videos, to find what they need, and even if they try to work ahead of time, well, it just wouldn't be plausible. It would just be a great weight on their shoulders that they would never be able to shake off. And there is no conclusive evidence of success. Once again, I come back to this because why would I implement something that I already know has not been tried and true? I want my students to succeed, the parents want the students to succeed, so I'm not going to give them education through a platform that has no guarantee that it will be something positive for them. So is it justifiable? I think it could be if I'm using this information or if I'm trying to do a video with a student that's struggling with a certain concept. If I know that they are slower in grasping a concept, I can say, why don't you watch this video that I recorded for you? And they can pause it and rewatch it and do it again and again and again. As long as flipped learning, if you'll call it, which technically I guess it wouldn't be, is only a supplement for a challenging concept and not the replacement of the teacher, I think that is something that can happen. I don't see a problem having the students watch a video on something that I have already taught over to deepen their knowledge or make them feel more confident in what they are getting to understand. But I still don't think that it's justified to flip an entire classroom for the entire day because there's not enough evidence that's convincing me to do so, and it doesn't really align with what I believe as a traditional Christian educator. So what are some of the wrong assumptions that it has? Well, class time is meant for collaboration, discussion, and hands-on learning. That's what they're trying to promote with flipped learning. These three things scream progressive education. Now, it would not faze me to implement this in my classroom if I can guarantee that my students already have the knowledge. Because what is a student going to discuss if they have no idea what they're talking about? They would be talking about nothing. There would be nothing to improve their critical thinking skills because they have no information to base it on. They could not collaborate with another student because either one of them would know a lot and the other one would know nothing, or neither of them would know something. And yes, I want hands-on learning to happen, but I want it to be done as long as the knowledge is already up here and not something that they're just pretending to know. Also, they assume that the teacher is just a guide. They're just on the side. I know as a traditional Christian educator that my job as their teacher is to be their authority, to be the person that makes sure that they learn, that they understand, that they're doing things the way it's supposed to be, that they're coming into the classroom and gaining something so that they can be effective service for Christ. So if they're assuming this already, then to me, this is just not something that I would personally promote in my Christian school. So based on that, let's look at what the Bible says. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. I already know what the way is. It's already been proven, tried, and true. You get into a traditional classroom, you stand in front of the students, you teach, you quiz them, you ask them, you give them worksheets, you work them in the board. It's worked for hundreds of years. So why would I bring something into my classroom that is not the way that has already been taught? I can't guarantee that my students are going to be successful, therefore I'm not going to stray from what Proverbs 22:6 says. Why? Because I want my students to be what 3 John 1:4 says. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children, or in this case my students, walk in truth. I cannot guarantee that they will be walking in truth if I'm trying to get them to listen to a Bible lesson on the internet or just a video. I want to see them. I want to see the light click in their eyes. I want to know that the Holy Spirit is working on their hearts. But I cannot guarantee that they're walking in truth if they're constantly just wondering what they're supposed to do. And then I already know that my students are sinners. Romans 3:23 says, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. If I already know that my students are sinners and that they're going to give in to their lazy tendencies and not watch what they're supposed to and not learn, I'm not going to do it. Now, this is where traditional education and progressive clashes, because they say, oh, they're good, they're going to do it, but we know that they're not going to. And the last verse is Proverbs 22:15 that says that foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. I want to drive it away, and that's through correction. And the only way I can correct a student is by having them right there in the classroom and nipping things in the bud and making sure that I grow their walk with Christ. But I cannot do that if I'm constantly having them do it online and just stand on the side. Because of this and every other reason that I gave, for flipped learning being something that's negative, I would not recommend having